All right, I call this meeting to order at 5:33. I'm gonna start with roll call. Alejandro here.
Here.
Eric.
Here.
Joey.
Here.
Edgar.
Here.
Monica.
Here.
Dane.
Here.
Alex.
Here.
Aubrey.
Here.
Josh.
Here.
Lacey.
Here.
Cece here. Same, I guess, absent for Cece. Greg.
Here.
Jess.
Here.
I'm here. Martin.
Martin's there.
He's there. It's
Okay.
muted.
Okay, cool. So everyone except Cece, for you, Aubrey. With that, we'll go into the agenda approval. Did everyone get their agenda in the email?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So then we'll just kind of go over the agenda, voice any comments or concerns, and then I guess just speak up if you have a motion.
I move to approve the minutes or agenda.
All right, Eric moves. Is there a second?
Josh, second.
Josh seconds. All right. Oh boy. Should we do a chat, Joey, for yeses and nos, or what's better for you, Aubrey?
That may be easier, is to do it via chat and just put it in there.
Okay. All right. So for all those in favor, just open up the chat. Just say yes. All those opposed, say no. Abstain if you're willing to abstain. Just write that out.
Although I guess we should have clarified, is there anyone, because I know there might be some phone calls, is there anyone here who can't access the chat?
Oh, okay.
I think they all should,
Yeah.
but.
I'm on a phone call.
Okay. Then Alejandro, just voice your vote. I'll let you know.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So everyone's votes. Alejandro, are you in favor?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So that's everyone, I believe. Yeah. Okay. All right. With that, we'll look over the minutes from the 11th. If everyone has those, please look over March 11 minutes. Should have been attached in the same email. Voice any questions, comments, or concerns.
I move to approve the minutes.
Cool. Eric moves. Is there a second?
Yep.
Cool. Dane seconds. Back in the chat. And then for Alejandro, kind of just give your vote on approving the minutes or not.
Yes.
Yep.
Alejandro's a yes. Everyone. 1, 2, 3. Almost got everyone's vote. Is that everyone? Everyone vote? I don't know.
It's a majority, even if it's not.
Okay, cool. All right, so moved. We will then go to reports. Don't really have any reports for this one, but Joey, do you have any reports? You're muted.
Yes, now I'm unmuted. Some of what I'll touch on is just under the updates and plans for spring when we get there. The only parts that I do want to kind of touch on, you all should have seen these, but just since it relates to some of what we're going to talk about, is to make sure that if people haven't, that they reference there's two different letters that have gone out that impact the committee. One was the president's letter back on April 3rd that talks about the spring quarter fees and waivers. That I just want to make the committee aware of in case there's any discussion here for that, but does have a list of all the fees that were waived for spring quarter, and then as well as the continued fees, of which the S&A fee is listed on there and kind of talks about the whys. behind why those fees were continued. And specifically, I know it has service activities fees because it supports bonds that were used to construct student mandated projects, as well as paying for direct student services and student programs. Again, a lot of those student services are still being offered in an online capacity and changing just the modality within there. But I want to make sure that we touch on that and that letter. The other one is one that recently went out this week. And I believe this only went out to students and faculty, so some staff may not have seen it necessarily, but it's the provost letter that went out talking about summer session schedule. The part on here that I want to make sure the committee is aware of is some things are still being determined for summer. There's not necessarily an update there, but the big part is with the provost putting out and sharing with all those that travel is going to be suspended for the summer. So clubs, even if they've been approved, and this impacts some of our previous approved funding requests, they're not going to be able to travel. And so I know we're working with those groups and areas to work on the refunds, not necessarily refunds, work on the changing of whatever those might be. But I want the committee to know that not only for spring, but also for summer, we're looking at no travel as well. And so some of the impacts we have that'll come up, we'll talk about a little bit later. Beyond that, I'll touch on most of my other pieces when we get to the updates and the planning for spring. But I don't know if there's any questions or any discussion on the president's letter talking about the fees that were being waived this quarter and the fees put in place, or about the provost letter that went out on Monday talking about summer session and travel being put on hold for summer.
I don't know. Do we know, I guess probably for Lacey, how far along we are, I guess, with like maybe getting those reimbursements back, or is it kind of almost up to date for all those that are not like summer funding requests? Lacey?
Sorry, couldn't unmute myself there for a second.
Oh.
So as far as the reimbursements are, they're not all completed. As even just as today, we're getting, receipts turned in. And so we are processing those reimbursements daily, again, just as much as today. So I would say if I was to give a percentage, we're probably closer to maybe being 70% kind of wrapped up on that side, but we still have some work to do. And there's some big ticket items out there that we have some work to do that we just don't have all the information yet, but we should, the financial information, but we should get that here, I would expect, in the next couple of weeks.
Sweet, thank you.
I think the only other thing that I would put on here is really just to talk about us moving to the online modality. Obviously, this week is kind of be a trial session for how things are going to work. So definitely don't feel hesitant to speak up if it's like, hey, this isn't working, or can we be more this way? I know our meetings are often pretty structured and regimented, and obviously some of those rules are still going to apply, but being patient and mindful as we move into this modality, that there may be some hiccups or challenges, especially because some are going to be on phones, some do have video, so there'll be potentially some connection issues. And so just being mindful of that, especially when we get to any discussion that has to take place. And I'd say if the chat piece works for you on the committee and for Aubrey, that may be easier. The other options we have is if we do a roll call vote on items that come up, we can always do that as well. If this is working, and most of them may be pretty straightforward, but we do have some options in some pieces, but whatever is really going to work best for this group. But I do appreciate you all kind of moving into this modality and making it work to the best of our ability. Again, virtually everyone's here. I think Cece was the only one who was not on here. So for us to be able to come together this quickly, I appreciate immensely. So other than that, I hope everyone is doing well with the new shift to things and doing the best that we can. I see Greg shaking his head down there. I would imagine it's going to be a little bit different for each area, especially for art and some others. I've already talked with some of your students about how that's challenging, Greg. But that is all I have, Brandon.
Sweet. And then Lacey, do you have any reports?
My unmute button is not cooperating. So the only thing that I wanted to make the committee aware is we had some, mostly it was housekeeping types of supplementals that needed to be routed to PBAC for approval. And those were routed to PBAC, I believe, 2 weeks ago. And we have not actually received a release of funds from the president yet. As you can imagine, there's quite a few things that are on everyone's plate. And so the update that we got yesterday at PBAC was that it's pending. So we just haven't gotten a chance to get the president to respond. So we are on hold with some of those things, even though some of those requests we know aren't happening, at least in the time frame that we thought they were going to happen. So they could be postponed, at least with some of the conferences. But as of right now, we're just kind of in a pending or holding zone.
Question, Lacey, does that include the uniforms for Central Mariachi?
Yes, that does include both Mariachi, the uniforms, and the trip.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions about the fees or the supplementals that are pending? Okay, great. That's all I have.
Awesome. Okay. With that, we'll move to public comment. First call. Is there any public comment this time from anyone?
I just want to say that this is either Hollywood Squares or the Brady Bunch with all the squares in front of me.
Any other public comment?
Yes.
All right, seeing none, we'll move to new business, subsection A, which is updates and plans for spring. I'll just hand this off to Joey. I guess we'll start with supplemental requests.
Yeah. So a couple things on here, as Lacey mentioned, the supplemental requests that we approved at the end of winter quarter are kind of in a pattern we're waiting to hear back. Again, we had already approved them, even though some of them may not go forward. PBAC, there was discussion about that, but given that they had moved up to the president, so we'll see. The other part is we had, as a committee, voted in winter quarter that we were going to hear the remaining requests that we had received. Given that we're in a situation for spring quarter and summer with travel, but for both that there's a travel freeze as well as a spending and a hiring freeze in a lot of these areas, is that the plan right now is that the supplemental requests that we've received will not come before the committee. Really for spring quarter, we likely won't hear any supplemental requests unless there are some emergency pieces that come forward. But as it stands right now, any spending, whether it be hiring, goods and services, all those require VP approval and really president approval at this point. And so none of those are really going to be moving anywhere. Now there may be spending requests or things that come up that, again, if there's certain level that could come to the committee, but at this point, the previous, and I don't remember, I don't have it in front of me, the 10 or so, I think, requests that we had remaining will not be moving forward to the committee, given that we can't spend any of the money, everything's kind of on a freeze, and they haven't presented yet. So at this point, we can kind of have some discussion, but likely what that'll be, and I wanted to wait until this came before the committee and you all had the chance to discuss and give some feedback, is we will send notice out to each of those areas. I think most of them know. Some of them have already been in communication. A lot of those pieces have already been canceled, but we'll send blanket notice out saying, given the current circumstances that we're in, that we won't. We're also kind of hoping to hear back from the president on the ones we had already approved in the winter, since we don't know where the president's stance is going to be on that as well. That's where the supplemental is right now. I don't know, before we move on, if there's questions. I know you all have seen, and it's been shared before by Lacey, requests that we did have that had come in that were pending. Obviously, this is a different set of circumstances than where we were. We would normally hear them, but given the status of the university and where things are on hold, it's really would not necessarily be in the best interest for us to entertain and move those forward, given that there can be no spending at this point. So any discussion, any questions, thoughts on that?
No, just pretty much we're not going to hear or talk about anything else probably going from here forward.
I have something to add.
Go for it, Alejandro.
Yeah, so I was under the impression that with S&A fees that we weren't actually like frozen. Like we could continue to make purchases. Just recently, like the ASCU board kind of had a talk with like Gaudino and Joel Clucking, and we were talking about like budgets. One question I was asked is like, hey, could we spend like our money to like have like some sort of like food drive or something like that? And then they, Gaudino and Joel were, they were like kind of like, why not? Like, you guys are use your budgets, but that's like purchasing and hiring freeze doesn't really apply to S&A. Is what they said.
With that, so two things. One, and Josh made a note in the chat on there, is if we could, again, just as we're navigating this, if you're not speaking, if you could try muting just to avoid any feedback that could be coming in there. The other one, Lacey, I don't know if you want to touch on that. I know some of those, Alejandro, are going to be a case-by-case basis is my assumption, but I don't think that's a blanket approval that's been given for the S&A pieces. But Lacey, I don't know if you have an update.
Yes, so it's similar to what Joey said. I think when we go through anything that's a hiring freeze or a purchasing freeze, the immediate reaction to that is nobody can spend anything, right? And that's not always the case in purchasing and hiring freeze. Every purchase or hire is scrutinized at a very high level. So Joey mentioned this earlier in the meeting, but at this point, any type of expense, pretty much regardless of the funding source, is going to be, has to be approved by cabinet level. So that's a VP. And I do know that there are certain things that are happening, but they are obviously reviewed case by case, and they usually have some sort of justification of the situation that we're in currently. So just kind of be, there's definitely things that people are trying to make sure we can do the services that are needed, especially with this change. So there are certain purchases happening, but at this point, nobody but the cabinet and above has approval to do so, at least from what I understand.
So it kind of makes sense, Alejandro.
Yeah.
Any other questions about supplement requests or the fee from anyone on the committee?
I mean, I'll just say, Brandon, if we do get any other requests, again, you all have seen on the list Lacey had winter quarter what was on the docket to come forward. Regardless of anything, we'll still share with you all that we got a request from so-and-so for this, but given the circumstances, it's not moved forward. Or yes, we're going to bring it forward or ask you all, but we'll keep you in the loop. So you all aren't thinking that we're just blanket denying things and you have no clue what's going on there. We'll be pretty transparent and upfront with that.
Sweet. Sounds good. I think we can move on to the next bullet point, which is the subcommittee.
And so there's two reasons I threw that on there. One is if there is any updates, I know there's been the weird transition. We have the extended spring break and all those to go ahead and give Edgar and the group a chance. The other one is we talk about some of the other plans moving forward, knowing that we're not going to be hearing supplemental requests. Is really that the committee meetings each week, because I think we do have a couple more coming up, are really going to be the chance for the whole committee to be able to delve into some of this administrative work. And so while there may be some work, Edgar, you and the subcommittee might want to be doing separately, my thought is, and again, it's up to the committee in general, is that some of that subcommittee work, especially because the basis of that has been done already, is we can have those be part of the weekly meetings. And since the subcommittee is the vast majority of the larger committee. We can kind of have those in there and just make sure that we're moving forward on it, and that we have the time now to actually do that. So that's what I have on there, but I'll kind of turn it over to Edgar if there are any updates or his thoughts, or for the others on moving some of that work the subcommittee had started to the larger committee for the rest of the quarter.
No, I think that's great. There hasn't been, any updates so far. I've been trying to get in contact with some other committees across the state. I emailed Wenatchee Valley College the other day, just because they recently redid their budget and cut a lot of it. So I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But other than that, there's no update. And I think it'll be great to bring it to the rest of the committee, just because, more people, more the merrier. So I don't know. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I don't. Maybe just kind of like an update. Maybe like what are some lifts that are still have to be done to kind of like finish it all, so we kind of know maybe what we can do in the future weeks as a whole committee.
I mean, I don't remember. It's been a while, obviously, and it's been a huge transition. But I think we really just need to, if we're going to do the categories, we need to figure out, who falls under what, and if we're looking at maybe cutting everything across the board by 20%, how does that look? Or what are some of the options, right? What do we look at? The demographics of an area, or should we even try to look at that, given some of the sensitive data from some areas, just polishing the details, if that makes sense.
Well, and if this works for you, Edgar, what I'm thinking is, knowing it's been a bit for everyone with the shift of stuff, is maybe next week on the agenda, we can do a brief part just as an update or a refresher, on here's what the subcommittee has been working on. Here's kind of what they've already done and where things are at, just so it's a refresher for those of us who have been doing it, but also an update for those who weren't. For me, really, one of the big pieces I want to make sure that comes out of this is a lot of this work is to look and see, to provide feedback to next year's committee as we go into the next base funding request. So we can have some of that groundwork for areas that we're looking for information. Because right now, if the committee is able to do this here by the end of the year, that gives Lacey and myself the chance over the summer to go in and edit the base funding request forms to say, here's the information the committee is wanting to know in reviewing these base funding requests. And we can do that based on some of those categories that we're looking at. And it also gives them a heads up on, here's over the next 4 years what the committee is wanting you to be reporting on or providing to determine whether or not this meets the kind of the standards or the expectations that the money was allocated for. So, if that works, Edgar, I'll kind of put you on the agenda for next week to give a review of where we're at. And then we can have some discussion on where we go or what we do next from that point once we get everyone back up to speed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I don't know if anybody would want to meet before that, maybe on a Monday or Tuesday, before we meet, just so the committee members, know what we were discussing. But if not, that's fine. I can maybe share my screen and show what I have too.
Sweet. Do you have anything else to add, Joey? Or
no, that was it that I had for the subcommittee piece, unless anyone else had any questions or kind of discussion right now.
anyone have any questions about the subcommittee? All right, cool. I think we'll move on to the next part, which is annual reports.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of blur these two together, the annual reports and the base funding program reviews, because really this is kind of laying out what we already had on our agenda for the committee to be doing for spring quarter, is going through and looking at the annual reports that were submitted by all the base funding areas. And then we still had a handful of base funding program reviews who were scheduled to come and present. I know you all had the chance to see a few of them during winter quarter. Given the delay with the meeting being, with the quarter starting late and then with the committee meetings kind of being pushed off, I've reached out to all those groups who had base funding program reviews and really let them know at this point the schedule's been changed, but that we are now moving to an online modality. And so if they can simply submit the information we were requesting them to present in whatever type of online form they want. So, and I'm really leaving it open because I don't want to put any expectations on individuals who may not have any expertise in recording themselves doing a presentation or things like that. As long as they're providing us the information is really what is going to be the most beneficial. And just as a refresher on where we're at, the ones that we still had were Wildcat Films, Wildcat Sports Radio Network, the International Office, the student services we do there, Source, University Centers, Westside Student Affairs, Campus Community Garden, and the Museum of Culture and Environment. We're all on the docket up through May 20th. I sent out their request. Wildcat Films has already turned theirs in and submitted kind of their questions in a nice PDF format for the committee to review. I did send that to the others and kind of gave them until Friday to reach out and kind of provide some feedback, but really leaving it open. I don't know your all's thoughts. My thought is that it would probably be easier, given people trying to navigate and not knowing if everyone has access, that we would set up in a future meeting where we would just review all of those program reviews as us. We wouldn't necessarily require the directors or the managers to come in and present, but we can look at the information, and if there are questions, we can ask them to come to a future meeting, or I can submit the questions to them. But this gives us the chance to kind of look over those on our own. And it may be something in the future that we move that everyone submits an electronic one, because we can post those on the website for individuals to look at as well. So I did ask them to send that in that modality, but I don't know thoughts from anyone. I also don't know what they're going to look like. Again, Wildcat Films is the only one so far, and theirs looks good. They answered all the questions. It's really neatly and cleanly put together, but we'll see with the others what that modality looks like. The other part is just the annual reports that we're going to go through. We're going to work to make sure that you all have access to them online, and we'll send out that access here. So you can see the annual reports everyone submitted, as well as the supplemental questions that the subcommittee's been working on. And maybe that's what we'll do, Edgar, on that side, is we'll add everyone to the subcommittee in Teams so they can see some of those documents. But we may move the annual reports in there. And then ideally what we would do is set up at future meeting, we're going to go through this chunk of them. But for you all to look through them in advance, the plan wouldn't be that we would go through them one by one in the meeting. It would be great. These are the ones we're going through. Does anyone have any questions or comments or concerns about, we'll say, Campus Community Garden? Great, none. We'll move on to the next one. But so the expectation really will be to kind of look at those individually ahead of time and note if there are any weird pieces you want to talk about or ask questions or get more information on. But to break those up so we're not doing all the annual reports in one meeting over our next couple of meetings. And so that's really kind of the, other than unexpected things that may come up, that was kind of our plan on how the rest of the quarter would look, is that we'll do some of the subcommittee work. We'll work through the annual reports so the committee gets a chance to discuss them and ask any questions we need, as well as look at the remaining base funding program reviews. But I don't know people's thoughts. Again, I know we're transitioning. This is not the modality we had planned to do these in, or the method we'd planned to do it in. So I don't know if there are concerns you all have, or questions, or anything along those lines.
I don't know.
Thanks,
I mean, I
Dan.
guess just giving them like a heads up, saying like if we have questions or anything, if they could like hop on or maybe send in a video or something like that. Just letting them know it's not like they just submit the paperwork and then it's good to go.
Yeah, that was my plan, was once I received them, and again, I gave them till Friday to kind of as a kind of a semi-hard deadline to see what we get. And then I would let them know, hey, we're going to be looking at reviewing these at this upcoming meeting. While it won't be required that they present, that they would know in advance so they could pop in. And ideally, if we have questions, they could be there. But if they're not, we can ask them to come to the next meeting or present in some manner, respond to the questions. Yeah, no, absolutely, Brandon.
Anyone else have any questions or thoughts about the annual reports or the base funding reviews? All right. Go for
Well,
it.
with that, I mean, and the intent of this meeting was kind of getting us to come together and get things going, and kind of lay out what the plan would be moving forward for the quarter. That's kind of what we have in terms of updates and plans. I know there's not a bullet point on here, but before we kind of proceed, are there other things that we may have missed that the committee is wanting to make sure we cover during spring quarter, or things that we had on the agenda that for whatever reason have fallen off of my brain, given all the changes and chaos?
I don't think so. Nope. All right. Just keep that in mind. If you all do kind of have something that pops up in your head after the meeting, just give Joey, Lacey, or me an email, and then we'll make sure we talk about it, hash it out, and make sure to get it on the agenda. But with that, we'll move to old business, which there isn't any. Correct, Joey? Cool. I haven't received any communications. I think it was just the biggest one. It was about like the S&A fee, but we hit that. People were wondering why that didn't get reimbursed or anything, but we talked about that. That was the only communications I received. How about you, Lacey, Joey?
Nope, that was the only thing, is what we already shared.
Cool. And then I guess with that, I'll lead into public comment, second call. Public comment by anyone out there on the meeting. All right. Going once, going twice. All right. No public comment. With that, I guess I entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
All right. Alex moves. Is there a second? Martin
second in the chat.
Cool. All right. And then we'll just kind of use the chat as well. All those in favor to adjourn the meeting, say yes. Opposed, say no. If you abstain, say abstain. Alejandro, what's your vote?
So I'm in favor.
Cool. And then so moved. All right. So I adjourn this meeting at 6:05. Thank you all for coming in this short meeting. Kind of lays down what we got going on for the future.